Welcome back to Ox Tools. I'm Tom. I'd like to welcome you to this first episode of a new series that I'm calling The Heart of Tools. The purpose or the intent of this series is to explore our connections to the people in the past through the tools that they used. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the tool and the story on this very first episode of The Heart of Tools. Welcome back. So what we have here, this is a precision sine bar that was made by a gentleman that was actually one of my greatest mentors. His name was Fred Van Beber. Okay, Fred Edward Van Beber. I think it was Edward. Actually, here's a picture of Fred. I worked with Fred back in the mid to late 80s. And we worked together for actually quite a few years. So anyway, he taught me a lot of stuff, and he died in 1995, okay, and I ended up with some of his stuff. And this sine bar was one of the things that I ended up with. So there's a little story here behind this whole thing, and it involves this sine bar and this little sine bar, and this is a bevel protractor that actually belonged to Fred as well. So it's a whole little story. So let me get started, and we'll tell the story of Fred's sine bar and how it came to be. So the best I can date when this sine bar was actually made, I never was able to ask Fred any dates on when this was made. So the best I can guess is around 1953, somewhere in there was when this was made. And he would have been about 18 at that time, okay? So the story goes is Fred, my friend Fred, he worked at his grandfather's machine shop, okay, when he was a little kid. So he was born in 1935, and he worked in his grandfather's machine shop in Petaluma, California. And when he was a little kid, big enough to pull the arm on a drill press, they had him drilling holes and working in the shop. So he kind of grew up in the machine shop environment, right? So by the time he went to high school, he was an accomplished machinist at that point. So anyway, he relayed some stories to me about his tool and die apprenticeship that he went through. And there's a couple of great little stories in there, but at some point they had to pick a project that they were gonna work on. So Fred told the instructor, he said, "Hey, listen, I want to make a sine bar." And the instructor, huffed and chuffed a little bit and said, "Gee, you sure you want to take that on? That's a pretty advanced project, right?" And he says, "Well, yeah, no problem. I want to do it, right?" So I guess he agreed. Obviously, he agreed, right? Well, the funny part of the story is Fred. He went home and he told his dad, they're sitting at the dinner table or whatever it was, and he, of course, parents ask their kids, "Hey, how was school today?" or whatever, and he says, "Oh, it was pretty good. I had to pick my project," and his dad said, "Oh, well, what are you gonna make, right?" And he goes, "Well, I'm gonna make a 5-inch sine bar." And his dad immediately said, "Ooh, make two, I want one." So right there, is kind of, in my mind, it's a great story, and it's indicative of the skill that Fred already had at that point when he was 18, okay? So, which is kind of neat. So obviously he made the Sine Bar, and I believe he made two. As far as I know, he made two. And so then, he had this thing since 1953, and then when I got it was sometime around 1996, somewhere in, or 95 or 96, somewhere in that region is when I got it. And but I was familiar with this particular Sine Bar before then, so we'll tell that part next. All right, so to tell the next part of the story, we have to look at this thing here. So what this is this is a bevel protractor, which is it's a nice piece of hardware, okay? And at the time when I met Fred, I was lusting after one of these for myself, right? But they're pretty expensive, okay? Or they were at the time. Well, they still are, okay? And it's got some other attachments here. The story's not about this. This is just kind of background. Anyway, I wanted to buy one of these, but what I did is I went and talked to Fred, and I said, hey, listen, I'm thinking about getting one of these things. What's your opinion on these bevel protractors? And he basically immediately said, don't buy one. And I said, really? I said, well, why not? I mean, it's very accurate. It's a nice instrument, and why wouldn't you use it? He goes, well, he says, they're kind of awkward to use. And he says, what's way more practical and simple to use and more useful in the shop is a Sine Bar. And I said, really? I said, I thought that was just for really fussy stuff. And he says, oh, no. He says, they're so simple to set up. And we're going to demonstrate that. They're so simple to set up and to use. He says, why not use them, right? Okay, so here, this is accurate to 5 minutes of angle. That's about all you can read it to, something like that. Well, these are accurate to seconds of angle, okay? So he said, yeah, and he kind of went through it and told me, and I said, geez, that makes sense. Well, guess what? Sine Bars are even, good ones are even more expensive than these. So that leads us to this tool here, which is my first Sine Bar that I bought. I actually bought this. I didn't make this one. So I bought this one, and I used this for quite a while. And I liked it because it had some tapped holes in it, and I thought that was useful. And it was more compact. And this is a 3-inch, and this is a 5-inch here. But anyway, that was my first Sine Bar. So let's pop over to the mill, and I'll show you some real quickly some ways that you can use a Sine Bar in the mill real quickly and simply to set really precise angles. Much simpler and much faster than a crummy protractor. All right, so here's your basic milling machine vise here. This is a 6-inch Kurt vise, 150 millimeters. Okay, now you have two really nice reference surfaces here. So if you have a 5-inch Sine Bar, it actually sits on those surfaces actually quite nicely, okay? And so what we can do is we can use our Sine Bar right in the Kurt vise, and you can clamp it in the vise and do your business, okay? Now, don't get hung up on the fact that you think you need gauge blocks to set these, okay? So, if you're just doing general machine work and you're not doing fancy toolmaker work, any known size blocks will work to elevate the rolls, okay? So what I find, and once again, this was from Fred, the idea of using adjustable parallels, okay? Now these are cheaper than gauge blocks, and you can set them quite accurately to pretty much any dimension that you want. And then you lock them down, and off Bob's your uncle. Off you go, right? So you stack that under there. You lock this down. You stack it under there. We clamp the vise, and now we got a nice precision angle. Okay. So adjustable parallels, totally okay. And you can stack these on top of 1, 2, 3 blocks to get larger angles, etc. Off you go. Or you can use gauge blocks too for more precise work. Okay, but setting these within a few tenths or a half a thousandths or something like that will put you much more accurate than the bevel protractor does. Okay. All right. So so that's one attitude that you can use this particular sine bar. Okay. Here's another attitude. So if you want to, for example, set your vise at a particular angle, actually, let's do it this way so you can kind of see, right? All right. Let's do it like that. So you can set your angle like so, okay? And then you can swivel your vise and you can indicate along this surface to set your vise at a precise angle in relation to the machine axis, okay? So that's another way you can use this. And then the third way is, one of my personal favorites is you can set an angle like this, and then actually, you know what? I'm going to change the camera. Okay, so on the Bridgeport type mill, we can tilt the head either direction here, and it's got a crummy angle scale on the side, right? So many times you need to set the head at actually quite a precise angle, okay? So a sine bar is actually an excellent way to set that. So imagine that we're tilting the head, okay? Let's say we need 15 degrees, okay? So we tip the head till we are close to 15 degrees here. Now, if we set our sine plate at 15 degrees, for example, this isn't 15, but I think you get the idea. What we can do is as we tilt the head, we can sweep on the surface of the sine bar until we null the indicator, and then what that means is the spindle is perpendicular to this surface, right? So we can set a very, very precise angle that way, okay? So you can get close with the protractor, but this gets you spot on, okay? Which is, you need it sometimes. And if you're doing things like gates and vents that intersect internally inside something, you really, really need to set your angles really well so that the math works out. The math only works if you set your angles accurately. Okay, so that's another way to use a simple sine bar in the milling machine. So I hope you liked this episode, this first episode of The Heart of Tools. I realized recently that our connections to our mentors and the tools that we use, they have a history. And when these people pass to the big shop in the sky, so to speak, sometimes that story and that past is lost. And so by preserving it, hopefully other people can learn from it. It's important to me. I would give a lot to be able to talk to my friend Fred just for a few more minutes. So I miss him, but every time I use his sine bar that he made, I really appreciate my time that I did have with him and my connection to him through the past and through tools. So thanks for watching.